How you doing, sir? My name is Chance. I'm a senior at DePaul, and I just wanted to say I've been following you for quite some time. The
Oh,
first time I saw you speak, I was a junior at Kenwood, and it was like a Chicago lawyer. You got some type of reward, and you were
yeah.
there, and I heard you speak. Um, the next time after that was at the Obama Foundation Summit last year. I saw you do it, and my job was like, we have tickets for Bryan Stevenson speaking. I'm like, cool, might as well go. So as a young brother from the South Side who's trying to be as hopeful as he can and
Yeah.
spark as much change in the world as he can, but who has also lost one cousin to gun violence before the beginning of my freshman year of college, recently lost another cousin to gang violence,
Yeah.
and just lost a friend due to an overdose just because of the demons that she was facing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do all these fantastical things and aiding, young black and brown from
Yeah.
all the corners of Chicago or the world, basically, who've been impoverished and haven't given the opportunities in order to like soar and really foster and let their knowledge flourish. And my hope seems like it's waning daily.
Sure.
Some days I wake up and it's just like I can do it all. And
Yeah.
some days I just want to stay in the bed. So
Sure. Yeah.
what do you say to someone like myself and
Yeah.
I'm sure many others who feel that
Yeah.
their hope just can't sustain? Like what do you say to someone
Yeah.
like us?
Well, first of all, you give me more hope than most people because you understand something about the ugliness and the brutality and the nature of the struggle. The people who I worry about, to be honest, are people who don't have a sense of just how deep and vexing and tormenting and traumatizing the challenges are. Because if you assume that it's only 2 feet deep when it's really 20 feet deep, when you get 5 or 6 feet deep, you want to give up. But you understand something about the depth of the problem. And that's why I am quite confident that you have the ability to do the things that have to be done. I really do. And it is a constant struggle. It's never going to, and that's why I was talking about, I wish I could get to the point where I don't have to see the pain and the anguish, but it never comes. But what does come is this growing confidence that despite of those people you've lost, you still have this hope. Despite of the weight of that injury, you still have this hope. And that's the power of it. I often look back, right? I was telling David earlier, I go to my window sometimes, I look out there and I think about the people who are trying to do what I'm trying to do today, 60 years ago. They frequently had to say, my head is bloody but not bowed. I've never been beat by a bottle. I wasn't. And yet I am the heir of people who survived slavery. Think about it, enslavement. People separated from their children, beaten, traumatized, raped, and yet had enough hope to find a way to love somebody to create the next generation who were tormented and traumatized and terrorized by lynching, and yet found enough hope to love somebody to create the next generation who fought against segregation and brutality and bigotry, and yet found enough love to create you. And so while we've got all of these problems around us, coursing through your body is the DNA of people who have felt and weighed against these problems for a very long time and found a way still to rise. And that's what you have to hold on to. I'll tell you this quick story. My grandmother, I talk about her a lot. She would do these things. And when I was a little boy, she took me back to Caroline County, Bowling Green, Virginia is where my people from. I was about 10. She said, bring your best suit. I said, okay, Mama. And one day we went walking down this road and we got to a field and she said, we're gonna go through the field, Bryan. And I was completely confused. I didn't know why I needed my best suit on to go to this field. We got into the field. There was a shack in the middle of the field. She stopped me, she cleaned me up. She was wiping my face. She said, okay, we're gonna go in this shack and you're gonna hear something. I said, okay, Mama. And we went into the shack. It was completely empty. I didn't hear anything. I was standing there waiting for something. And at some point, I looked at my grandmother and she was crying. I'd never seen her cry before. And because she was crying, I started crying. And then she squeezed my hand, she took me outside. And I said, Mama, why were you crying? She said, don't worry about that. I said, Mama, I didn't hear anything. She said, yes, you did. I said, no, Mama, I didn't. Because I missed what I thought I was supposed to hear, I started crying again. And I'd forgotten all about that story until I was in college, about your age. And I was working on a paper, and I went to see my grandmother. I interviewed her for 3 hours. And at the end of the interview, she said, you never asked me about that time I took you to that shack. I'd forgotten all about it. She said, there's something more I want to tell you about that day. She said, I took you down to that shack, but I never told you what that shack was. She said, that shack was the slave cabin where my father was born. And she said, every month when I was a child, he would take me in there and he'd say, sit here, Victoria, and just listen. I still didn't understand it. Now I'm working in Montgomery, Alabama. I'm 100 meters from the river where enslaved people were brought by boat and by rail. I'm 100 meters from the slave auction site. My building, my office is on the site of a former slave warehouse. Within 2 miles of multiple lynchings, I'm up the street from Dr. King's church. I'm a half block from where Rosa Parks sat on the bus. I go to jails and prisons all the time, and I hear these sounds of torment. And one day I was sitting down by the river, and I was thinking about my grandmother, and all of a sudden I got what she was talking about, because in that moment it felt like I could hear the sounds of the enslaved. I could hear them coming off the boats and off the rail cars, and I could hear them being paraded up the streets, and I could hear the people gathering in those fields to mob and terrorize Black people during lynchings. I could hear the violence of those civil rights people who had to confront that brutality, and I go into jails and prisons and hear that sounds, and all of a sudden those sounds started morphing into something else. And what all of those people were saying, the enslaved and the lynched and the segregated and the incarcerated, what they were saying is, Bryan, you keep fighting. And I heard it just as plain as day. And when you have a soundtrack like that, when you have a community of people like that behind you saying, keep fighting, there is nothing you can't do. And there is a community behind you, young man. People who suffer through slavery and lynching and segregation. And they look at you and see how talented you are. And what they're saying is, you keep fighting. There are going to be some hard days and some difficult days, but you keep fighting and we will cheer you. And I will cheer you. And that's how you hold on to your hope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.